They had a drawer for me. That was the first thing I noticed when I came back to the cloister after 11 years, that the long silver wall of case drawers still had one with my designation on it, third row from the floor, the little slot light dead where the others glowed a soft amber. A dead light meant a closed case. It meant the Cohen-Weil chorus had reached its verdict on the human called Del Marrow and filed her away as settled. Not dead, just finished. In their language, those were nearly the same word, and I had learned enough of their language back then to know that the difference did not much matter to them. I stood in front of the drawer with my kit bag on my shoulder and my readmission slip warm in my hand, and I let myself look at it for exactly as long as I let myself look at anything I could not change. Then I turned and walked into the amphitheater to be shamed. You have to understand what the trauma cloister at HFY Cohen actually is before you understand what happened in it. Picture a surgical theater built like a well, tiered galleries rising in rings, bright and white and overlit, no shadow anywhere, because the Cohen-Weil believe shadow is where error hides. At the bottom of the well, a shallow pit floored in warm gray resin, and in the pit, a patient cradle, and around the cradle when a class is in session, a ring of tall, translucent figures with their hands raised and their throats open, humming. They heal by agreement. I mean that precisely. A Cohen-Weil surgeon does not diagnose alone and act alone the way I was trained to. A body on the cradle is repaired only when the whole surgical chorus arrives together at a single true reading of what is wrong with it, and then the reading itself, sung in harmony, drives the repair. Their medicine is their music. When the chorus agrees, the wound closes. When the chorus is divided, nothing happens at all, and the patient waits inside the disagreement until either the disagreement resolves or the patient does not. It is a beautiful system. I want to be fair to it. In 11 years of thinking about the cloister, I never once decided it was a stupid way to keep people alive. For most of what walks into a trauma theater, the slow poisonings, the settled diseases, the wounds that have already declared themselves, a chorus of 100 translucent minds converging on one truth is better than any single surgeon's guess. They fear improvisation the way I fear sepsis, and they are not wrong to, most of the time. Most of the time is the whole story. Hold on to that. Chorus master Veln Thiroux was waiting for me in the pit. Thiroux was old even by their reckoning, his skin gone from the clear glass of a young Cohen-Weil to a clouded, milk-vein translucency, so that you could see the slow architecture of him working under the surface like weather in a jar. He had been the one, 11 years ago, whose voice had led the chorus that closed my case. He remembered. Their kind do not forget a verdict. A verdict is a thing they built together, and to forget it would be to unbuild it. The readmission, he said. He did not sing it. He spoke flat in the human-facing register they use when they want you to know they are lowering themselves. I opposed it. I want that on the record before we begin. It's on the record, I said. I read your objection on the way in. That surprised him a little. A ripple went through the clouded veins of his throat. He had not expected me to have read it, or to say so, or to say it without heat. But I was 54 years old, and I had spent 11 years doing unglamorous work in unglamorous places, and I had lost the ability, somewhere along the way, to be wounded by a form letter. You were shelved, Thiroux said, because you cannot hold a reading. Do you remember why we closed your case, Marrow? You closed it, I said, because I acted before the chorus agreed. Because you acted before the chorus agreed. He turned the words over, tasting the confession in them. The coalition seconded you to this cloister as a field practitioner, a liaison, a courtesy, and you stood in this pit and you cut into a patient while the chorus was still divided over the diagnosis. You did not wait for the truth. You imposed one. The patient lived, I said. That, said Thiroux, is not the point, and you have never understood that it is not the point, and that is why your light is dead. He gestured at the wall of drawers behind me without looking at it. A patient who lives inside a false reading is a wound waiting to reopen. You bought that one a few years. You corrupted the chorus that day. 2 of my students never sang true again after they watched you. You did not heal. You interfered. I did not answer that. There was a version of the answer that was true, and there was no version of it that would move him, and I had learned to tell those apart too. You are readmitted as remedial, he said. You will sit in the lowest gallery. You will not enter the pit. You will observe until you can demonstrate that you have learned to wait. Do you understand the terms? I understand them, I said. Both of us knew I had not agreed to them. He let it go, because to a Cohen while the two are also nearly the same word, and that habit of theirs was going to matter later, though neither of us knew it yet. The lowest gallery is where they put the ones they have given up on. That first morning there were 11 of us down there in the cheap seats, and I was the only human, and I could feel the whole amphitheater above me arranged into the shape of a question none of them had bothered to ask aloud. What is she still doing here? What did the drawer let out? I sat, I watched. I am good at watching. It is the first thing they teach you in field medicine and the last thing you keep. I should tell you where I had been for 11 years, because a closed case does not stop moving just because a chorus decided it was finished. When they shelved me the first time, I went home. Not to Earth. Earth had not been home for a long time, but to the ragged edge of the coalition, the frontier hospitals and the relief ships and the pressurized field tents on worlds whose names the cloister would never have bothered to learn. That is where the coalition keeps people like me. We are not elegant. We are the ones they send when a colony dome cracks or a supply run goes bad or a mining rig folds in on a shift of 200. And there is no time to be elegant and no chorus to be part of, only the work and the clock in your own 2 hands. For 11 years I did that work. I set bones in gravity that kept changing. I ran triage in corridors that were filling with smoke while I ran it. I lost people. You always lose people. The honest number is never 0, and I saved more than I lost. And I never once in all that time waited for anyone to agree with me before I put my hands on a dying body, because there was never anyone to agree with. Out there, agreement is a thing you get after if the patient lives to argue about it. The cloister would have called every day of those 11 years a catalogue of wounds. I called it Tuesday. I did not think about HFY much. I want to be honest about that too. A shelved case does not spend 11 years plotting its return. It spends 11 years working. But sometimes in the bad hours, in a tent with the power down and a body in front of me that the pressure was leaving, I would remember the shadowless light of the cloister and the beautiful converging frost of the chorus, and I would think, they would let this one die correctly. And then I would stop thinking about it, because a body does not care what you are thinking about, and I would get back to my hands. The readmission came out of the war. When the coalition told HFY to open a war medicine track, somebody in an office decided that the cloister needed field practitioners on hand, people who had actually done the thing the war track was trying to teach. And somebody with a longer memory than sense pulled the file on the 42 of us who had been seconded there over the decades. 41 of those files were cold trails. People retired, people dead, people gone so far out on the frontier that no message would reach them. One was still active. One was still, at 54, carrying a field kit and answering calls. So they sent the summons to me, and I read it in a relief tent between 2 shifts, and I sat with it for a long time. I did not come back to be vindicated. I want that on the record next to Chiru's objection. I came back because the summons said war medicine track, and I had spent 11 years watching the coalition's edge get thinner, and I knew, the way you know weather, that the war was going to reach even the long peaceful worlds eventually, and that when it did, a cloister full of the finest healers alive was going to stand in its beautiful shadowless light and sing over the dying while the clock ran out. I did not come back for my drawer. I came back for the clock. I only understood the difference later, standing in front of 42 amber lights, but it was true from the first summons. The first days back were a lesson in how completely a place can absorb you into a story, It has already finished telling about you. To the students in the high galleries, I was not a person. I was a teaching aid. Tiru had reopened my drawer to shame me, yes, but the shamming was pedagogical. I was the walking illustration of the wound, the closed case that had been let out precisely so that a generation of healers could look down at it and understand what they must never become. I felt them looking. In the low gallery, you are always being looked down at, literally. The architecture makes sure of it. And I sat there in the cheap seats and let 112 of the most gifted minds in the sector study me the way you study a specimen pinned open under glass. I learned their names by watching, because watching is the thing I keep. Asul Ro, obviously, you could not miss the spine of the chorus. But the others too. A cadet named Dalin who read too fast and had to hold himself back to stay in harmony, and hated it. A cadet named Vesh who never once found the true reading first but tuned to it more purely than anyone once someone else had found it, a follower's gift, and the cloister valued it, and I understood why. And Sesh Vale in the middle gallery, earnest, young, the kind of student who felt the patient on the cradle as a person and not a problem, which the cloister treated as a flaw she would grow out of. I watched the chorus assemble and disassemble, day after day, over settled cases, the slow poisonings and the declared diseases and the old injuries that had made up their minds long ago. And over those cases the chorus was, I will say it as many times as it takes, magnificent. I watched them close a wound that no single surgeon in the coalition could have closed, 112 minds converging on one truth so completely that the truth itself did the healing. And I sat in the cheap seats with my field kit on my knee and I thought, I could never do that. Not in 1,000 years. What they have is real and it is better than what I have, for everything except the one thing. The one thing was coming. I could feel it coming the way you feel a pressure drop before a dome cracks. The war track was going to put a clock in that beautiful room, and I had spent my whole life in rooms with clocks in them, and I knew what a clock does to a chorus that has never had to hear one. The class that term was a war medicine class, and I want to explain why that mattered, because the cloister did not usually teach war. The Coenwile had been at peace for a very long time. Their consensus healing needs peace the way a garden needs stillness. It is slow. It is deliberate. It assumes the wounded will hold still, and the theater will stay quiet, and the chorus will have as long as it takes to converge. But the coalition that the Coenwile had lately, reluctantly, joined was not at peace, and the coalition had made it politely clear that a member world's premier medical academy could not go on training healers who fell apart the instant a body arrived faster than a diagnosis could be agreed upon. So HFY Coen had opened a war medicine track, trauma under pressure, mass casualty. The kind of medicine where the patients do not hold still, and the theater is never quiet and the chorus never, ever gets as long as it takes. They hated it. You could see them hatting it, the top gallery students especially, the elite, because everything the war track demanded was a small blasphemy against everything they were. And the finest of them, the one they had all arranged themselves around, was a young Coenwile named Asul Ro. Asul Ro was, I will grant him this, genuinely brilliant. When the chorus assembled around a settled case, his was the voice that found the true reading first and held it clearest, and the others tuned to him without being told to, and the wound closed clean and fast and beautiful. In a peacetime cloister he would have been a legend by 40. He knew it. Brilliance that knows itself is a particular kind of hazard, and I had been treating that hazard in one species or another my whole life. He came down to the low gallery on the third day to look at me. He brought 2 of his tuning partners with him, and they stood over my seat, all 3 of them lit up bright and clean in the shadowless light. And Asul Ro studied me the way you study a stain someone has told you is famous. You're the interference, he said. Their word for me had already become a noun, the human who broke a chorus. I'm Del Mero, I said. They reopened your drawer to remind us what failure looks like. He said it pleasantly. That was the thing about Asul Ro, he was never cruel in a way you could point at. It's good pedagogy, actually. A closed case, walking around. Chorus Master Tiru is a better teacher than I gave him credit for. Maybe, I said. You want to sit, there's room down here. The two partners rippled. It was almost a laugh. Asul Ro did not laugh. He looked at me for a moment longer, and something behind the glass of his face recalculated, and he said, "You act alone. That's what your file says. You reach into a body while the truth is still in dispute, and you decide by yourself. Do you understand that on my world we have a name for a mind that decides alone against the chorus? I imagine you have several." "One," he said. "We call it a wound." And he turned and climbed back up to the light, satisfied, and I sat in the cheap seats and I thought, not for the first time in my life, about how the most dangerous people are the ones who have never once been wrong in a way that cost them anything. I want to show you how their medicine failed, because if I only tell you it failed, you will not believe how good it was. The first live patient trial of the war track came in the second week. The cloister ran it as a drill, a co-while volunteer, sedated, given a controlled and survivable but genuinely dangerous compound injury. Two competing systems failing at once, a bleed and a toxin, the kind of thing where the treatment for one worsens the other, and you have to choose your order and choose it fast. In a peacetime case, the chorus would take the hours it needed. The war track drill gave them a clock. The chorus assembled. 112 students in the rings. Asul Rose voiced the spine of them, all of them humming down into the pit at the body on the cradle, reading it together. And for a while it was extraordinary. I watched the reading form the way you watch frost form on glass, the harmony finding itself, the disagreement narrowing, the true shape of the injury emerging out of the chorus like something being remembered rather than discovered. But the clock was running, and the body was doing what bodies do, which is not wait. The bleed was ahead of them. I could see it. I did not need their consensus to see it. I had seen it 1,000 times in rooms with no chorus at all, the volunteers' translucent skin dimming at the extremities as the pressure fell. The chorus knew about the bleed. But there was a faction, a good faith faction, that read the toxin as primary, that wanted to sing the toxin down first, and Asul Ro himself had not yet committed, and until the spine of the chorus committed, the chorus could not act, because that is what a chorus is. They argued in harmony. That is the eeriest thing I have ever watched. There was no shouting. There was a chord that would not resolve, two truths held against each other in the air over a dying body, each of them beautiful, each of them half right, and the body going down between them. A co-while proctor stopped the drill. They flooded the volunteer with a general stabilizer and pulled him off the cradle alive, but worse than he had arrived, and the chorus came apart into its 112 separate silences, and the theater was very quiet. The reading was not wrong, Tiru said, into that quiet to the whole amphitheater. The reading was not yet complete. A complete reading is worth waiting for. And I sat in the low gallery and I thought, he cannot hear the clock. None of them can hear the clock. To them the clock is a rudeness the coalition has imposed on the sacred slowness of the truth, and they will die singing before they will let a body's schedule set the pace of their agreement. 2 more drills that week ended the same way. 2 more volunteers off the cradle worse than they arrived, and each time Tiru said some version of the reading was not yet complete. And each time I watched a room of the most gifted healers I have ever seen refuse, on principle, to touch a body they had not first perfectly understood. They failed in different ways, and I want to lay the ways out, because the variety of the failure was the whole diagnosis of the disease. Dahlan, the fast one, the one who read too quick and held himself back, failed by reading correctly and saying nothing. In the 4th drill he had the true shape of the injury before anyone. I could see it in him, the way you can see a word on the tip of someone's tongue, and he sat on it, because to sing a reading the chorus had not yet arrived at is to break harmony, and Dahlan had been taught his whole life that a broken harmony is worse than a slow one. So he held the right answer inside his own throat while the body went down, out of discipline, out of virtue, and afterward Theroux praised him for his restraint. I watched a gifted young mind get praised for knowing the answer and refusing to say it, and I understood that the cloister was not going to be defeated by ignorance. It was going to be defeated by its own best manners. Vesh the follower, the pure tuner, failed by having no one to follow. In the fifth drill the chorus split so evenly that no spine formed. No first voice found the true reading clean enough for the others to lock onto, and Vesh, who had never in his life found a reading first, simply had nothing to tune to. He hummed in the empty middle of a divided chord, waiting for a leader who did not come, and the body waited with him and lost. He was not a bad healer. He was a superb instrument with no hand on it. In a chorus that agreed, he was worth 10 of me. In a room with a clock, he was a beautiful silence. And then there was Sesh Vale, who failed by feeling it. She was in the sixth drill, the last one that week, and hers was one of the voices that read the bleed correctly against the faction that read the toxin, and the chorus would not resolve, and she felt the body going down under the argument the way I feel it, in the spine, as a physical wrongness, and she could not carry it. Mid-drill in front of everyone, her voice came apart, not into a wrong reading, into no reading at all, into the raw sound a person makes when they are watching someone die inside a technicality and cannot make the room move. The proctors stopped the drill. They flooded the volunteer and pulled him off worse than he came, and Sesh Vale stood in the middle gallery with her clear throat working and nothing coming out of it. And I knew, from the low gallery, exactly what was going to happen to her, because it had happened to me. She stopped coming to the pit after that. I found out later they had shelved her, a fresh dead light on the wall, a new closed drawer. A gifted girl filed away because she had let a clock get into her chorus and could not sing clean afterward. The cloister did not see that as a loss. The cloister saw it as the system working. The disharmony had identified itself and been removed. I thought about my own drawer, third row from the floor, and I thought, they are not going to filter the fear out of these kids. They are going to filter out the ones who feel the clock, and keep the ones who can't and call it healing and send them to a war. That was the night I stopped intending to sit quietly through my remediation. I did not sleep much. I went and stood in the shelf room in the middle of their long dim night cycle in front of the silver wall, and I counted the dead lights. There were more than I expected. Row on row of closed cases, each one of mine the cloister had decided was finished, and I did not know yet that 41 of them were people like me. I only knew that a place which produced this much light also produced this much darkness, and filed the darkness away, and did not grieve it. Sesh Vale's drawer was still warm to the touch. They had only just closed it. I put my hand flat against the cool metal of my own dead slot, and against her still warm one beside a dozen others, and I made myself a small and specific promise, which was not a plan, because I have never been a person with a plan. It was only this. The next time a body goes down inside a disagreement in that pit, I am not going to sit in the cheap seats and watch it die correctly. I did not have a plan. I want to be honest about that because the story would be tidier if I said I did. I had a habit, which is a different thing. The habit was 50 years old and it went. When a body is dying faster than the truth can arrive, you act on the best reading you have, and you keep acting, and you correct as you go, and you accept that you will sometimes be wrong in a way that costs something, because the alternative is to be right in a way that costs everything. Field medicine is not the art of being correct. It is the art of being useful before you are certain. Every human who has ever knelt in a bad place with their hands inside someone knows this in their spine, and no Cohen-Weil had ever needed to learn it, because the Cohen-Weil had been at peace for 1,000 years, and their bodies had always been willing to wait. The turn came on a day that was not supposed to be a drill at all. There was an accident in the cloister's own power spine, a coolant line in the sublevels, a rupture, a flash of superheated vapor through a maintenance gallery where a work crew of 4 Cohen-Weil technicians were mid-repair. They came up into the trauma pit not as volunteers with controlled injuries, but as 4 real bodies, scalded and shocked and bleeding, all at once, faster than anything the war track had rehearsed. A genuine mass casualty, in the one place in the galaxy least equipped, for all its brilliance, to move fast. I was in the low gallery. The whole class was assembling, and I watched the chorus try to do the only thing it knew how to do, which was to converge on one body and one true reading. And there were 4 bodies, and no single truth to be found, because 4 different things were wrong with 4 different people, and a chorus cannot be in 4 places at once. They swarmed the first cradle. The other 3 technicians lay on the resin floor where the proctors had laid them, waiting their turn inside the disagreement, and one of them, the smallest, was not going to get a turn, because the pressure was already gone out of her and she had minutes, and the chorus was 1 body deep in singing. I watched it happen the way you watch a wave you already know you cannot outrun. The chorus was doing everything right and everything wrong at once. On the first cradle they were beautiful. Rowe found the true reading in seconds, the others locked to him. The wound began to close under the harmony exactly as it was supposed to. And that was the catastrophe, because the better they were on the first body, the more completely they were not on the other 3. A chorus is 1 mind. 1 mind cannot triage. Triage is the art of deciding who waits, and a chorus has no mechanism for deciding who waits, because a chorus does not choose between patients. It converges on the patient in front of it, wholly, and the others simply are not in the reading. The 3 on the floor were not being treated slowly. They were not being treated at all. They had fallen out of the chorus's attention the way a name falls out of a song. A proctor was trying. I will give the proctors that. One of them moved between the 3 on the floor with a general stabilizer, the same blunt flood they used to end a failed drill, but a stabilizer is not a treatment. It is a way of buying a body a little time to wait more slowly, and the smallest technician did not have time to wait more slowly. I could see her going. Translucent skin makes dying visible. You can watch the pressure leave a koan while the way you watch light leave a window at dusk. She had minutes, and the chorus had a whole body still to close and no second self to send. I went down into the pit. Nobody stopped me, because everybody who might have stopped me was busy failing to save the first technician fast enough. I knelt beside the small one. I did not have their instruments. I had my kit, the field kit I had carried for 11 years, which is a stupid, primitive, magnificent collection of clamps and pressure and old chemistry. I read her in about 4 seconds, a severed line high in the thoracic architecture. Translucent tissue makes that easy. You can see the leak, and I did the thing that had closed my case 11 years ago. I acted on an incomplete reading. I got a clamp onto the line and I got pressure where pressure needed to be, and I bought her the minutes the chorus could not. And I did it alone against the chorus, without agreement, with my bare hands and my field kit, in the sacred pit, in the shadowless light. While 112 of the finest healers alive watched a human do the one thing they had been trained their whole lives to know, was a wound. Then I stood up, and I looked at Rowe, who was the spine of the chorus on the first cradle, and I said the only sentence I said in that whole pit, and I did not sing it and I did not shout it. Split, I said. You take 1 body each, agree with yourself, correct as you go. Split the chorus. To a koan while it was very close to the worst thing you could say. It meant, stop being 1 mind. It meant, each of you act alone on your own incomplete reading and be a wound and save someone. Rowe stared at me. Behind the glass of his face I watched the recalculation happen, the same one from the low gallery, but bigger, and this time with no satisfied conclusion waiting at the end of it. He had 4 bodies and a clock and a chorus that could only converge on one, and standing in front of him was the closed case, the interference, the human who broke a chorus, telling him the only way to save all 4 was to do the forbidden thing she had been shelved for 11 years ago. He did not do it. I want to be exact about the cost, because this is a story about cost. Rowe, the most brilliant mind in that cloister, could not make himself split. Everything he was said no. He held the chorus on the first cradle, and the first technician lived, and the other two on the floor slid into the disagreement, and one of them slid all the way down and died on the resin in the light, while the best healer of his generation sang perfectly over someone else. The one I had clamped lived. The one Asil Rose sang over lived. The two who waited, one lived barely, when a proctor finally broke and flooded him with stabilizer. One did not. And I knelt there with a dead technician's blood, which is clear, which does not look like blood at all until you have knelt in enough of it, going tacky on my forearms. And I felt the one honest thing I let myself feel in that whole term, which was a flat, cold, specific hatred. Not for Asil Rose, who was only what they had made him, but for the beautiful system that had taught 112 people that the truth was worth more than the clock, and had sent them to a war, and had shelved anyone who felt the difference. I set it down. You learned to set it down, but I wanted on the record that I felt it. The cloister did not thank me. I did not expect it to. What the cloister did was worse and stranger and, in the end, the whole reason I am telling you any of this. They convened a review. Not a drill, a review in the full amphitheater to ruin the pit, the surviving technicians present, the record of the accident sung back note by note so the whole academy could study exactly what had happened and, more importantly, decide what it had meant. Because to the Cohen while, a thing does not mean anything until the chorus has agreed on what it means. They were going to hold a chorus over my hands the way they held one over a wound. I was made to stand in the pit, not to speak, to be read. Chiru walked the amphitheater through it. The rupture, the four bodies, the chorus converging on the first cradle, and then the human coming down into the pit and acting alone against the chorus on an incomplete reading. This is the interference, Chiru said, that we closed 11 years ago. Observe that it has not changed. Observe that it did in this theater the precise thing for which its case was closed. He let that sit. And observe, he said, and here his old clouded voice did something I had never heard it do, that the technician it acted upon is alive, and the technician upon which our best chorus sang, in perfect agreement, is also alive, and the technician for which we made no chorus at all is dead. The amphitheater was very quiet. I have taught in this cloister for 400 years, Chiru said. I have closed many cases. I closed hers. I was not wrong to close it under the medicine we practice. She was a wound, and a wound must be closed. He turned slowly and looked at the wall of drawers, and for the first time in the whole term he looked at my dead light directly. But we no longer practice only that medicine. The coalition has given us a war, and a war is a theater in which bodies arrive faster than truth. And in that theater, a chorus that will not act until it agrees is not a healer. It is a beautiful voice, singing over a body it was too slow to save. Asil Rose stood up in the top gallery. I think he could not help it. You're defending the interference, he said, and there was something under his voice I had not heard before, something cracked, because Asil Rose had held the chorus and sung perfectly and someone had died anyway, and he had watched a human with a field clamp save the one he could not reach. You're telling us she was right to be a wound. I am telling you, Chiru said, that we have been teaching you to be perfect in a theater that does not reward perfection. I am telling you that we filtered out Sesh Vale and 40 others before her because they heard the clock, and I am telling you that in a war the ones who hear the clock are the only ones worth keeping. He was quiet for a moment. I am telling you that I was wrong, Asil, not 11 years ago. Now, I am wrong now if I close this and go back to singing. I have thought about that moment more than any other in my life. A 400-year-old mind in front of his entire academy, unbuilding a verdict. Their kind do not do that. A verdict is a thing they made together, and to unmake it is to say the chorus can be wrong. And if the chorus can be wrong, then the whole architecture of their medicine has a crack in it. Chiru put the crack in himself, out loud on purpose, because he had watched a body die on his resin floor, and he could no longer pretend the clock was a rudeness. Here is what the cloister did, and I set it down plainly, because it is the only monument the dead technician got. They rewrote the medicine. Not all of it, they were not fools, and consensus healing is genuinely the right tool for most of what a body brings you. But they added a tier below the chorus, a thing that had never existed in their whole history, and they had to invent a word for it because they had no word for a healer who acts alone before agreement. The word they built translated, roughly, as firsthand, a healer permitted in a theater under a clock to act on an incomplete reading and correct as they went. A triage tier, an act before agreement band, the thing my whole species does in every emergency room without thinking twice, formalized at last into the medicine of a people who had spent 1,000 years believing it was a wound. And they reopened the drawers. That is the part I did not expect. Chiru stood at the silver wall in front of the whole amphitheater, and he opened my dead light back to amber, and then he opened the ones beside it, because it turned out I was not the only human they had shelved. Over the decades, the cloister had seconded 41 human field practitioners from the coalition, one at a time, and closed 41 cases, every one of them for the same reason. Every one of us had, at some point, acted before the chorus agreed. Every one of us had been a wound. 41 dead lights in the silver wall, 41 closed cases, 41 field medics filed away as failures because we had all done, alone, the one human thing. Chiru opened all 41. The wall came up amber, row after row, and it was the brightest I ever saw that room, and it was the only time in the whole term the light in that place looked warm. A sole row did not come to the reopening. I understood that. I did not need him to come. A man who has never been wrong in a way that cost him something had just watched himself be wrong in the most expensive way there is, in front of everyone, and the only mercy I could give him was to not be in his eyeline while he learned to carry it. I heard, later, that he transferred into the first-hand tier. That he was bad at it at first, brilliance is bad at improvisation, the two skills fight, and that he stayed anyway and got less bad slowly, the way you get less bad at anything worth doing. I hope that is true. It is the kind of thing people tell you to make an ending sit better, and I have never been sure whether I believe it, but I hope it is true. I finished the term as a first-hand. They let me into the pit. I taught the tier in the end more than I studied it, how to read a translucent body in 4 seconds, how to choose your order when both orders are wrong, how to keep your hands moving while your certainty catches up, how to be useful before you are correct, how to hear the clock. You cannot teach someone to hear the clock, not really. You can only stand next to them while a body goes down inside a disagreement, and let them feel it, and hope the feeling takes root instead of getting filtered out. The one I had clamped came to find me once near the end. The small technician, the one whose severed line I had pinched shut with a field clamp in the sacred pit. She was recovered by then, thin and clear and new-healed, and she stood in front of me in the corridor outside the shelf room, and did the Cohen-Weil thing that is not quite a bow and not quite a question, the gesture they make when they do not have a reading for something and want you to know it. She did not thank me. Their kind do not thank. A thing that happened is not settled until the chorus agrees on what it meant, and no chorus had met over her survival. But she stood there, live and warm and clear, and she said, in the flat human-facing register, I was not in the reading. And I said, no, you weren't. And she said, you were not in the chorus either. And I understood that she was trying to tell me we were the same kind of thing, the one the song had left out and the one who acted from outside the song, and that this was, for a Cohen-Weil, very close to gratitude and much harder to say. I let it be what it was. I have learned to let things be what they are. Some of them heard the clock. Not all. That is the honest number. Medicine is always the honest number. When my readmission ended and my secondment ran out and it was time to leave HFY Cohen for good, I went back to the silver wall one last time. 42 amber lights now, mine among them, all reopened, all of them the warm color that means a case is live, a case is still being worked, a case is not finished. And I stood in front of them the way I had stood in front of my own dead light 11 years and a lifetime ago, and I let myself look for exactly as long as I let myself look at anything. The thing nobody tells you about being the proof is that the proof is lonely. 41 of those lights belonged to people who had done exactly what I did and had been shelved for it, and had gone home, and never known the drawer got reopened, never known the medicine changed, never known the war class reached back into the closed cases and pulled us all up into the amber. They were the ones who earned it. I was only the one who happened to still be walking around when the cloister finally needed to see it done. That is not the same as being the one who did something. It is just the one who was standing there when the clock finally got loud enough for a room full of beautiful voices to hear it. I shouldered my kit, the same field kit, the same stupid magnificent clamps, and I walked out of the trauma cloister at HFY into the clean, cool light of their long, peaceful world, which was not going to be at peace much longer, and which had just learned, 11 years too late for me and 41 people too late for everyone else, that there is a kind of healing that cannot wait for the truth to arrive. They had a drawer for me. It is open now. That is the whole thing I have to tell you, and I have told it once, and I am setting it down.